Ladies and gentlemen, I warmly welcome you to the third Green Conversation, proudly hosted by Environmental Foundation Limited in partnership with our main sponsor, Nations Trust Bank. EFL is a pioneer public interest litigation organization that was established in 1981. Our mission is to protect and conserve the natural environment of Sri Lanka through legal and scientific means. Over the years, EFL has litigated over 200 court cases, which has been supplemented by thorough investigations as well as substantial research. Green Conversations is a series of events which aims at bringing various stakeholders from various walks of life to one platform to promote advocacy and dialogue, to enable a platform to talk about environmental issues. EFL aligns its topic for this event with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and the topic today, which is climate change, is in alignment with the 13th United Nations Sustainable Development Goal on taking urgent climate action. Without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker, Dr. Chathurangi Wickramaratne, to give a brief overview of climate change and its impact in Sri Lanka. Dr. Chathurangi heads the Science Division at EFL currently, and she has experience in environmental projects both in developed as well as developing countries, in the governmental as well as the non-governmental sector. She is an early career scientist who is keen in finding solutions to balance development needs with environmental conservation. She holds a PhD from the University of Adelaide, where she studied impacts of climate change on water quality in freshwater systems. Over to you, Chathu.
Hi everyone. So climate change is such a vast topic and a very hot topic, literally hot topic. So I thought I would just give you a brief background on how climate change science has evolved over time and where are we now, what are we doing about it, and whether that's enough. So back in the day, in early 1800s, that's when the scientists really started wondering why the Earth is so warm, given its distance from the sun. And then they realized that there should be some sort of an insulated blanket around the Earth that's capturing this heat. And later on, the studies showed that, in fact, there are gases, what we now call the greenhouse gases, that have the heat-absorbing capacities. So towards the late 1800s, it was actually a Swedish scientist named Arrhenius who found out that he did the calculations to show that doubling of carbon dioxide levels would in fact lead to an increase in temperature over time. And he was also the first one to show that this increase in carbon dioxide will be related to fossil fuel burning. So by the mid-1900s, this was a major study area, and scientists actually warned the US government that climate change is going to be a major issue in the future. And because of that, in 1988, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was established. So where are we now? Did I get the right way? Yeah, okay. So you can see that the carbon dioxide levels have always fluctuated over hundred thousands of years, but never have we ever exceeded 280 to about 300 parts per million of carbon dioxide. And as humankind, we passed a really great milestone in 2013 when we exceeded 400 parts per million of carbon dioxide. And currently we are at about 415 parts per million. Okay, so carbon dioxide is not the only greenhouse gas. I'm sure many of you are aware of this. And these gases, carbon dioxide, methane, the nitrous oxides, and the gases that's related to chlorofluorocarbons, hydrofluorocarbons, They are the main greenhouse gases that are actually emitted because of human activities. And we all know that most of the greenhouse gases are emitted because of fossil fuel burning that's used for energy sector and also the transport sector. And burning fossil fuels not only release these greenhouse gases, but it also releases other toxic gases that lead to environmental pollution and air pollution, and it's actually known to be an invisible killer. So we all know about the fossil fuel burning, but there's also other contributors like waste. So for example, 50% of the waste generated in Sri Lanka are biodegradable waste. And because this waste is mismanaged, it goes into a landfill and starts rotting, and during this process, it releases not only carbon dioxide, but also methane, which is even more potent as a greenhouse gas. And actually, it's estimated that 1 ton of biodegradable waste will release about 8 tons of carbon dioxide and about half a ton of methane. And then we have land use changes, so forest clearing for resettlement or other development activities, and removal of mangroves for aquaculture farms, and infilling wetlands. These ecosystems are really rich in carbon. They all have a carbon storage. And for example, 1 hectare of mangroves store about more than 900 tons of carbon. So when you're disrupting these ecosystems, these greenhouse gases are released into the atmosphere. And agriculture also has livestock rearing, which release methane, and also other cultivation practices that disturb the soil carbon. So what are we doing about it? So in 2016, Sri Lanka is one of the 199 countries that signed and ratified the Paris Agreement on climate change. So the main objective of the agreement is that we keep the warming well below 2 degrees of Celsius while continuing all the effort to limit this temperature increase further to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And so one of the questions that has been asked is this legally binding? Well, for a fact, there are non-legally binding and legally binding provisions in the agreement. And for example, so whatever the actions that we choose to do to reduce our carbon footprint, these are voluntary. These are decided within the country. But every country must submit these nationally determined contributions, or the NDCs. And rightfully, we focused on 5 main sectors: the energy sector, where it said we will reduce our carbon footprint or the greenhouse gas emissions by 20% by focusing or promoting more renewable energy sources like wind, solar, hydro, biomass, and also enhance more demand-side management activities. Actually, these are not the only actions that are in the NDCs. I took only a few examples just to give you an example of like what's in there. There are a long list of very ambitious targets and very vital targets, I mean. And then we have transport. The transport sector involves creating energy-efficient transport systems, improving public transport, and reducing traffic congestion. Industry also has green reporting systems. Waste, we've said we are going to focus more on composting and having better waste management facilities and mechanisms. And for forestry, we've said that we will increase our forest cover from 29% to 32%, and we will increase reforestation and also forest underutilized lands. So, knowing all that, we always see these news headlines every other day about, well, illegal forest clearing, and then we have mangrove destructions and the resistance to renewable energy and more coal power plants coming in. So it's time to really step back and think, are we really doing enough? Is this what we said we're going to do, and is this really, that's not what's happening by the looks of it. So, how am I doing with time? Oh, sorry, okay. So, the truth is that even if developed countries reduce their greenhouse gases by significant amount, unless other developing countries or the rest of the world go carbon neutral by 2030, there's no way we are going to achieve the Paris climate agreement objectives. So something to think about, and I will throw this question back at the audience to think whether we are doing enough as a country and whether we are actually sticking to our commitments. Thank you.
Thank you, Shanta, for that very brief but very informative overview. Now I take the opportunity to invite Dr. Shirokhi Jayawardena to speak on the impact of climate change on drastic weather patterns. Dr. Shirokhi is the Deputy Director from the Department of Meteorology, Sri Lanka. She is a member of the Gender Task Force of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. She is also a member of the National Expert Committee on Climate Change Adaptation and has conducted extensive research and has authored many publications, including recent trends in climate extreme indices over Sri Lanka. Over to you, Dr. Shirokhi.
So I'm starting from what Tatrangi has finished. So we already know about how much greenhouse gases we put into the atmosphere, and I am going to talk about how that will lead to extreme climatic conditions and changes in the climate system. So according to that IPCC 5th assessment report, changing climate leads to changes in extreme weather and climate. Before we talk about the extreme weather, we just need to understand about how the climate system works. So when it's a very complex system, it has different components like it has ocean, an atmospheric component and hydrosphere, including ocean, and cryosphere, including sea ice, land ice, glaciers and everything, and biosphere and land. So these components are interacting each other every time. So with this interaction, climate is changing. That we call climate variability. And in addition to that, some external factors like natural factors like volcanic eruptions and solar variations also change the climate system. And in addition to that, the human-induced factors like greenhouse gases emission into the atmosphere and land use changes also changing our climate system. So this is because most of the extreme climate events lead by this internal variability of the climatic system. So that is the interaction between different components like mainly atmosphere and ocean, atmosphere land and atmosphere ice components like that. So this is the one phenomena called El Nino Southern Oscillation. So the atmospheric component and oceanic component interacting each other lead into anomalous warming over the is there a pointer here? Anomalous warming over the eastern equatorial Pacific Ocean and anomalous cooling. So this is the typical climatology of the Pacific Ocean. So in the eastern Pacific Ocean, generally temperature is cooler than western Pacific Ocean. We call this area cold tongue. So unusual warming over this cold tongue and unusual cooling of this around this cold tongue leads the this El Nino and La Nina situation, which change our atmospheric circulation pattern, which bring and distribute heat and moisture all over the world. So these changes in the atmospheric circulation pattern leads unusual weather patterns as well as extreme events over different places over the globe. So another phenomena is Indian Ocean dipole moment, that unusual warming over the Western Indian Ocean and cooling, we call it positive IOD, and unusual cooling over the Western Indian Ocean and unusual warming in the Eastern Indian Ocean called the negative IOD. So right now we have positive IOD over the Indian Ocean, and these phenomena leads to different weather patterns. For example, this is Atacama Desert, one of the driest places in the world, And so with 1915 to 16, that strong El Nino event brought a lot of rainfall over this region, and so flowers are blooming over this desert area. And Chennai flood that in 2015, that November, also one of the effects of this strong El Nino event in 2015. So this, before we talk about climate change, I think we need to understand the difference between climate variability and climate change. Climate variability is to year variation of the that long-term mean of weather patterns. So, for example, this is a rainfall distribution, actually temporal distribution of rainfall over Colombo. So this black line represents the climatology or long-term mean, and these dots represent the rainfall amount each year, the rainfall amount received during each year. So you can see some years we got excessive, twice more than climatology, sometimes 1/4 of the climatology. For example, like we experienced very intense rainfall events during past 2016, 17 and 18 May, but this year we didn't receive any very less rain during month of May. That is because I already told you there was one phenomena called Indian Ocean dipole. We have positive dipole at the moment, so which suppress our monsoon activity over this region. So this kind of year-to-year variation, there are some occurs because of the natural effects, but this climate change or human-induced climate change has aggravated that. So this graph actually shows us that temperature anomaly during month of January, that global average temperature anomaly. Anomaly means the departure from the long-term mean. So the red dot represent that temperature anomalies during El Nino years, and blue dot represent La Nina years, and these are the major volcanic eruption years. So volcanic eruptions insert some aerosols into the atmosphere, which gives us cooling effect. So many things to say. So I didn't actually go for that extreme climate event. I'm sorry about that. So because my topic is extreme climate event. So but anyway, this graph shows you how this disaster, observed disasters has gone up during, especially between 2000 and 2007. You can see that majority of 90% of the natural disasters are related to hydrometeorological disasters. And then and one more thing, we downscaled our climatic, that is observed climate trends, like from historical events we can see the observed climate trends, so which gives us some idea what happened up to now. But then we need to see what's going to happen in future. For that we need to run some global models, and we recently downscaled those models into Sri Lanka. So we found that under both emission scenarios, high and moderate emission scenarios, our northeast monsoon rainfall is decreasing and southwest monsoon rainfall increasing, and this is increasing is more over the wet zone, which might lead to more and more floods and landslides over this area in future. And this reduction of rainfall in during northeast monsoon might lead to more and more droughts in future over the dry zone. We downscale up to actually 3 river basins also. This is Nioya, Janoya and Malamatoya. That also shows us the reduction of rainfall in especially Maha season, our main agriculture season. So these are the possible extreme events we can observe in future. More and more heat waves and warm spells, and increase of extreme rainfall events, and more floods and landslides. More dry periods leading to droughts and water shortage, and increase of rainfall variability, severe thunderstorms, cyclones, and changing in monsoon pattern and season. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Shivamari. Next in line, we have Captain Samaravikrama, representing the Sri Lankan Navy, to speak on the impact of climate change on the Sri Lankan seas and preventive measures taken by the Navy to mitigate the impact of climate change. Presently, Captain Samaravikrama is the Senior Command Medical Officer of the Western Naval Command in Sri Lanka. He is a surgeon with a Bachelor of Medical Science degree from the University of Jawaharlal. He is a pioneer member of the Naval Environmental and Marine Conservation Committee since 2014 and has authored over 30 scientific abstracts, particularly about environmental health. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Actually, I think previous presentation already described a lot of things about the climate change, but I would like to summarize what are the climate change effects. As previously said, with the climate change, we can get more drier season, more wetter season, and cyclones with a very strong in intensity. And my main concern about what is the effect of the sea water level. And past 100 years, actually we have measured 0.1, 0.5 meters to 1 meters seawater rising. But now scientists say 2050 will be up to the 2 meters. Just imagine, up to 2 meter sea level rising, what can happen to our ecosystem and our activities in the land. We are fighting for the just 1 inch of the land, but within next 100 years, we will lose 1,000 acres or 1,000 hectares of land from the island. But we are still silent on this issue. We are talking about many of others. And also, as the result of that, we have lost our coastal ecosystem, our human use resources in the coastal area, and many more things. And also, actually at the moment, we don't have a exact solution for the greenhouse gas emission. That means with the extreme temperature, seawater rise continuously rise. And you can see within the available data, this process is continuing. How can we mitigate this? This is the real big problem. With the melting of the iceberg, expansion of the oceans, with the global warming, with the rising of the seawater, is continuous process. And as I previously said, our whole ecosystem, especially mangroves, corals, seagrass, and beaches, will affect this problem. And issue is with we have only solution to can find to this ecosystem. If we can improve and if we can protect or conserve or develop this ecosystem, we can get some solution. That is the only way to mitigate this problem. As I said, you can see what are the activities, what are the import in our coastal land, what are the in future, what will be affected. It will affect destroy our ecosystem and also will affect to the human use resource. These are our mitigation actors, which are already created by Sri Lanka Navy. As I said, this may be a simple, but the collectivity of this simple action maybe will get the big result in future. During past few years, we have started the mangrove plant project. In 2018, I think around October or September, we already completed the 100,000 planting of the mangrove, all those islands, especially ecosystem. What is the effect of the mangrove? The mangrove is the one of the defense lines of the like at the beach. It will reduce the dynamic intensity of the seawater rise, and it will protect the coastal area. That is the main biological and ecosystem benefit from the growing of the mangrove. And also other ecological benefits effects also there. It will increase the forestry environment, and also it will increase the productivity of the life on the, and many effects are there. This is the Sri Lanka Navy activities which was done last 2-3 years. We have planted more than 100,000 mangroves in special ecosystems, and also the other project, this main project is the coral planting. This is a very particular and very scientific subject. We will develop. We are learning it, and we have made some special structures. We are called the reef balls, and which are particular for the planting of the coral, and we have to maintain the coral health and continuous monitoring and surveillance, and time to time we have to do reef cleaning because of the erosion of the coastal area. This coral may be affected, and also polythene and other wasted thing affect to the coral growth. We have to remove it and time to time, and you can see especially at northern and eastern coastal area, this special ecosystem we have developed with replanting of the coral. And other thing is we are doing the continuous beach cleaning program. This is very important because polythene are the main destructive thing to the coral, and because they are obstruct the coral area, and it will affect to the photosynthesis of the coral plant, and it will ultimately destroy the coral area. And we have some innovation solution because most of the time we are unable to recycle the contaminated plastic. Now we are innovative method to use these contaminated plastic in innovative way, because this is the sustainable solution. Otherwise we are clean the area and we are again put the waste to the environment. And other one thing, we are particular to stop the worm fishing and also the bottom trawling. That will destroy all the coral area, and we are, as the Sri Lanka Navy, we are continuously doing our surveillance and stop the IUU fishing. And also we are very much concerned about the prevent the oil spilling, because oil spilling are one of the main destructive in the coral and the coastal ecosystem. Especially in Sri Lanka Navy already mitigates to action to prepare the environmental sensitivity index, which are the mitigative plan how to prevent the harmful effect of the oil spilling. And already we have done for the western coastal line. We are planning to do a southern area also in near future. And I think the last slide, you can summarize what are the environmental related activity as a Sri Lanka Navy. We are initiate as the sustainable development goal. You can see that we are doing the project of the water security, sustainable cities, and protect the life on the earth, protect the life on the water, and many ways. As a Sri Lanka Navy, we have believed these are the very simple and minor activity, but as a team, as a collective, we will get the good result in near future.
Thank you, sir. Next in line, we have Ms. Chamila Veeratunga, the National Project Coordinator of the International Labour Organization in Sri Lanka, who is currently involved in a watershed management project on flood mitigation and climate resilience. She was also the former Chief of Operations at EFL and has vast experience in climate change adaptation planning. Today, she will speak about disaster risk reduction with a specific focus on flood and drought resilience.
Thank you, everyone. Hello, everybody. First of all, I have to say my slides are, other than this slide, everything is very boring, not colorful, like in the previous presentations. So, I'll be talking about some of the work we do at UN and in an international labor organization, and also what others in the field, like the ongoing projects in the field of climate resilience and disaster risk reduction. To begin with, so I think I'll be having sort of an interactive session. What do you mean by climate resilience? Is it the same as disaster risk reduction? No. Any idea? Okay, today suppose that there is enormous rainfall, like say 100 millimeter or 200 millimeter, which happens very often last year. But if you can go back to your normal life tomorrow, that you are resilient enough. That means you can come back to your normal life within a very quick time. So resilience is coming back to normal when shocks are there. So how would you then build the resilience? That's what we need to, like I'm going to talk about in this presentation. So there are two ways we can broadly categorize climate resilience. How building resilience to strengthening ecological infrastructure and to managing disasters when it happens. What do you mean by ecological infrastructure? I think in the previous session, Captain Samaravikrama spoke about it. That is, you have highly resilient ecosystems. May it be mangroves in the coastal area, may it be like natural forest, which can absorb shocks on behalf of you. So you don't have to worry about it much. There is ecological infrastructure to absorb shocks for you. So you just carry out your life the way it has been before the disaster. And the second approach is, we need, okay, disaster happens, we keep our boats ready, or when floods happen, and in a drought situation, we keep our stocks ready, we construct tanks to store water. These are sort of adaptation measures as well as managing the disaster. So, what should be given priority, or should we need both? Just a thought from you, anyone?
Ecological resilience.
Yeah.
That is the priority.
Yeah. Okay. That's the priority. But at the same time, we need to have disaster management and climate adaptation measures as well. Because about 50 years back, we had the forest cover more than 70%, and the environment is not so damaged or polluted, or like we had more or less pristine environment other than tea plantations. But during those years, 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, we had floods as well as we had droughts in some of the areas. Then we need to prioritize improving ecological infrastructure, but at the same time, we need to have disaster management system as well. However, in 2015, Sendai framework is something UNDRR, United Nations Disaster Risk Management Agency, came up with in Japan, Sendai, that they decided we need to have more ecological infrastructure, reduce disaster risk, and prioritize disaster risk reduction rather than disaster management. But still in Sri Lanka, we believe we need both, because some of the disasters, we can't say natural disasters, so that is one thing we need to highlight. We don't say natural disasters, there are natural hazards, disasters are human involved. So Since time is limited, I'll be talking a bit on policy-related measures as well as some of the ground-level implementation that we have been doing. In relation to disaster risk reduction, there is no single policy that addresses disaster risk reduction or climate resilience. But do we have to have any of them? A dedicated policy for climate resilience? It can be very subjective, but I believe we don't have, because climate resilience or the impacts from climate change we need to address in each and every policy that we are working on today. We have in the country. We usually identify 4 cycles in the disaster management cycle. There is mitigation, preparedness, response and recovery. So we need to figure out where to start. Either it's mitigation, preparedness, response or recovery, but each and every identified area we need to mainstream or incorporate climate resilience measures. I'll be talking about some of these later on. And some of the policies we have identified, we need to start with the land use and policy planning, of course, because it addresses the forest cover, how much forest cover we need to maintain in the country, and natural resource management, watershed and water resources management, and these things will help reducing the risk most of the time. That is, not managing the disaster, managing the risk. But what would you do when disaster happens? We need to adapt. We need to come back to our normal lives very soon. So, what are the ways of coming back to your normal life soon? First thing is, we need to be, okay, I put the environmental component in the top because we have been working on this area for the last many years and this is our priority. I haven't seen any of the policies addresses disaster situation in wildlife protection related legislation or policy. But last year, some of you would have seen when disaster happens, there are boats and they are going over again, capturing some of the endangered animals there. But other than that, I haven't seen any action plan or strategy. What could you do when disaster happens? There are native species, there are species at the brink of extinction. Are we going to do something when floods hit? Or maybe in the drought situation? We don't have any. There is one area we need some sort of attention. And the second thing is economic development. For the rural economy in Colombo, we might not feel it as it is in the rural area. Formal sector employees like us, we are full-time employees, so if rain for 5 or 6 days, we don't mind. At the end of the month, we get our salary. But what will happen to informal sector employees? What will happen to these, like the rice packet sellers and along the street food vendors, or whoever would earn something from their daily, whatever activities they do? So this is one area we have been working at UN and the ILO to strengthen and give them more resilience towards disasters through business continuity planning. Sorry, I did one more minute. And then the most important area I want to talk about is social protection. That is, social protection we need to mainstream because disasters don't affect different groups of the society in the same way. For sure, the most people in the poverty, below the poverty line are getting affected. So that's why this particular area called, this is a new, I can't say new to the world, but in Sri Lanka, this is a new concept that we call adaptive social protection. So we need to provide consistent income, shelter, medical facilities, all of you know. But this is in a disaster situation, how could you address this? So it has to address all layers of the affected society, but mainly it has to be inclusive of children, elderly people, and people with special needs, we call disability people, and other marginalized groups of the society. So this is some of the work we do in terms of adaptive social protection and other resilience measures. As I said before, for the informal sector, we carry out business continuity planning. So when the next disaster happens, they don't have to suffer the way they suffered in the previous cases. And then, most important thing is long-term sustainable livelihood measures that could lead to resilience. That is, one thing is area-specified industries like Kitul industry in the Ratnapura district. It enhances, in the long run, these industries contribute for soil and water management, but at the same time, it gives you something as your income. So what we recognize or what we understood was when something is related to your livelihood, the conservation is related to livelihood, is long term, it gives you something that can be practiced for long. So this is one area we are working on. And then there is restoration and improvements of the infrastructure in the northern province, that is tanks, to enrich the catchment areas. So the farmer families will get some benefits and they will maintain it because they will be getting benefits from these tanks. And identification of policy areas that will enable immediate actions in mainstream climate resilience. So this is a research we are working on, and Environmental Foundation Limited is giving us the technical support. And this is what ILO and some of the other UN agencies do. And United Nations Development Program is currently working with Ministry of Industries to promote SME policy, especially under disaster situation. And then there is Climate Resilience Improvement Project by Ministry of Marine Development and UNDP again. And next project is UNICEF's Improving the Shock Responsiveness and Adaptiveness of the Social Protection System. And last, the World Bank is doing a 75 million USD project on adaptive social protection. Okay, last slide. These are the essential components of the adaptive social protection system, but we believe that we have to manage disaster situations well. One is you need to collect information that is being done by this World Bank project, and then adaptive programs. What do they need? The people in Ratnapura might not need the same as people in Kilnoti, so we need to understand what needs to be done to increase so build their resilience, and adaptive financing, and then more coordination among institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Shamila. Next in line, we have Mr. Ranga Pallavala to enlighten us on the economic impact of climate change and the solutions provided by Janathakshan projects on climate change adaptation and resilience in Sri Lanka. Mr. Pallavala is the Chief Executive Officer of Janathakshan, a Sri Lanka-based organization committed to deliver green and sustainable development using appropriate technologies. He has been involved in climate change adaptation, resilience, and governance-related research since 2009 in various capacities. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you very much for coming here. I'm going to be very brief in terms of my presentation. Right. Anybody can identify this particular photo? Where is this? Have you seen this? Exactly. This is Norelia Post Office building, one of the oldest buildings in Sri Lanka, which was constructed by British government. Second post office constructed by British government. I have put this photograph because this is very close to my personal life. Because my father, being a government officer, he's been based in Norelia, so I was born in Norelia and I did my primary education in Norelia. Norelia is a central hill place. Most people call it Little London because of its cooler environment. So when I was schooling in Norelia, I have a completely different experience compared to other children in Sri Lanka. Because in other parts of Sri Lanka, the schools generally start at 7:30 in the morning. But I used to go to the school when it was used to start at 8:30 or 9, because it was too cold for us to go to school by 7:30. And as a primary school boy, even in the nursery, I used to wear trousers, not shorts, long sleeve shirts, and a tie is a must, and we have a sweater on top of that. That's a part of our uniform, because it's very cold. And so in the morning, it's very uncomfortable if you wash your face with cold water. Every day you need warm water. And Norelia was the only place in Sri Lanka where you could buy coconut oil in kilograms. You generally buy coconut oil in terms of liters or bottles or whatever, but in Norelia it was in kilograms. If you want to buy coconut oil, you go to the shop and say, I want 1 kilogram of coconut oil. They have trays, which the coconut oil is frozen, they cut it into pieces and weigh it and give it to you. They basically wrap it in a piece of paper and give it to you, not in bottles. And when you carry it, like you carrying a loaf of bread, because of your warmth of your hands, some of the coconut oil might, dissolve and absorb into that paper. But when you come to home, you just keep it on a plate, not in a bottle. But now, it's a completely different scenario. Norelia, you don't have coconut oil in kilograms anymore. You can have it only in 2 months, somewhere in December and January. All the other months, it's in liquid state. Why is that? The average temperature has gone up. That's the reality. We don't feel it, but the average temperatures are going up. So, this was very alien for me when I was a kid. But this big kind of a thing hanging in the ceiling. The fans were not a part of Norelia people's life. No refrigerators, nothing. Refrigerators you don't need. If you cook something, you can keep it for 1.5 days without rotting. You can eat it, just eating it. But these are changing, and that's the danger of it. So we keep on breaking the records of warmest year in the world. So 2017 has been recorded as the warmest, and I believe it's going to be 2018 very soon once the reports are out. I'm not going to repeat it, this slide was shown earlier on. But what are the climate change impacts? Gradually, the annual rainfalls are increasing, the number of intensified rainfalls is increasing, number of dry spells are increasing, and so many other disaster situations. So unfortunately, we need to adapt to this. We don't feel it, but adaptation has limitations. It's like we are in a pot of water which is put on a cooker. So it's keep on warming, and of course we can adapt to a certain limit until you get to high temperature. So what we can do? We can do different things, but you need to aware of what is happening. These are the trends summarized by Dr. Shiromani earlier on. These are trends by 2080. What's going to be the average temperature increase? You can see most of the part of Sri Lanka, the average temperature is going to increase and the rainfall is increasing. I'll go for this. This says the southwest monsoon is going to increase gradually in Sri Lanka, whereas the northeastern monsoon is going to reduce. So that means our dry zone is going to get drier, while the wet zone is going to get more better. So that means people in the dry zone must be provided some of the excess water we have in the wet zone. How we are going to do it? Are we going to build more dams? Are we going to build more canals? How are we going to do it? But that's the reality. That's the kind of economy-wide adaptation we need in the country, which is very challenging. And where we need a lot of investments as well. Climate change, they have 3 types of impacts. One is the primary impacts, which is about the increase of temperature, changes of the weather patterns, etc. Secondary impacts is the impacts on our businesses, on our production system, on our ecosystem. We see that. But the most damaging thing are the tertiary impacts, which are the socio-economic impacts. Impacts on farmers' livelihoods, impacts on fishermen, impacts on the business, our economy. How we are going to change your lifestyle. These are the most significant impacts that we need to adapt. I'm going to come up with a Sinhalese idiom called Amrutjila Kalagui Maragane. I'm sorry if there's people who don't understand Sinhala. But this does, now when you say Kalagoi, most of the people think it's the iguana, the animal. But actually it's not iguana. Kalagoi is the farmers who are cultivating sesame. Thala Vavana Govi. Thala. Thala is the sesame, it's a kind of a crop that cultivates in the dry zone, which is very drought tolerant crop. Which can withstand drought things, and generally the farmers in the dry zone, after getting their harvest in April before the Sinhalese New Year, and soon after that they just sow the sesame on their paddy field. So after the intermonsoonal rain, it can start and flower and produce the crop in 3 months. That is in June. June, the Poson month, a lot of people goes to Meentale, and while they are going to Meentale, they go to Dabula, and the Dabula farmers are with excess sesame. So they go and bargain and do all the haggling and get the lowest price for sesame. Thala, Rubio, Maraga, and all. And they plan it. They can plan it. They can predict rainfall, how the rainfall coming, when the rainfall will come. So they plan it, but unfortunately they can't do it now. So imagine, if you don't know what to do, after 3 months, you are not quite sure that you will get your salary in 3 months or 2 months. What are you going to do? You need to do adaptation. I'm not going to go through all the slides, but I will show 2 slides. Any familiar? These are tea plantations. We never used to water tea plants. It's rainfall. But now we need to do that. Why? The rainfall is not sufficient. Tea, #1 export crop in Sri Lanka, giving a lot of economic benefits to Sri Lanka. What's going to happen to Sri Lanka if the tea plantation is gone? Last one. How many of you have insured your house? Imagine a sudden typhoon take off your roof tomorrow. I'm not saying that it will happen, but imagine. Because you might see all these newspapers. And how many of you are ready to repair a roof in few days or few months? Do you have enough money? Probably you have money. A few million rupees in your account, so it's not a big problem. But most of the people can't do that, so I agree with that. I'll just stop there. I'm not going to talk because I'm running off of time. Just keep something good goes on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We next have Sharika Sena Naikar to speak on corporate responsibility in mitigating climate change, particularly on practices established by MAS to mitigate climate change in Sri Lanka. She is the Director of Environmental Sustainability at MAS Holdings, one of the largest apparel manufacturers in Sri Lanka, and is directly involved in the implementation of the group's sustainability strategy through specific action plans, projects, and initiatives. Her work also involves building a culture of sustainability within the organization that has a ripple effect wherever it operates. Over to you.
Thank you. I was hoping Ranga's a lot older than he looks. It's ridiculous that he's gone through so much of time in such a short time to see such radical change in an entire way in which the climate has changed. That's the reality. So who are the culprits? One of them standing in front of you, the manufacturers, the industry guys. Maybe perhaps because we didn't know, but now we know. We've had all of the speakers coming up and telling us scientifically what's going to happen. We're forecasting. The question is, are we ready and what can we do about it? At MAS, we have always wanted to passionately and genuinely try and do what we could have done. But in the past, really, it's been a lot more, it was reactive. And I have 6 minutes, so I don't want to tell you everything, but I want to tell you 6 things that I think are absolutely replicable that we do at MAS, and I believe that if everybody was to follow suit, that it would make some kind of an impact. So one of the things that we were doing from the beginning was just sort of reaction to, we see something and an opportunity and run to it. That was about 30 odd years ago. But in 2010, we thought that one of the first things we need to do is understand the type of overall, in terms of accounting for the impact. And in 2010, we decided to understand our baselines, something that many organizations still haven't done. Like, what is your baseline? How much water, energy, and set a baseline. Because if it's not measured, it's very difficult to know the progress you're making. And so the first step we did from setting the baseline, we realized what our challenges were, what were we working with, where are we most vulnerable. Most people call it a materiality, but for us, we just wanted to know, given the way things are going, are we able to manufacture, are we able to exist as an organization the way we are in the future. So we decided to, in 2016, set a plan, a fairly aggressive plan. So this is the first thing that we haven't seen a lot. I mean, we would think this is the most obvious thing that every major corporate would have, but not necessarily. We don't have a plan that takes us into 2025 or into 2030 that says, what kind of an organization do we have to be in order to be ready to deal with this resilience, to be able to bounce back, to be able to manufacture in a country that probably won't let us use water, to be in a country that doesn't subsidize maybe electricity for manufacturing. Are we ready? Step number one, everybody needs to have that plan, and with really, really aggressive goals in terms of how will you survive in that. So I'm going to take you through the environmental bits of some of our plans and things that we have done that have had significant impact for us. So, number one, if this works. Okay, also this is just in terms of our performance to date. So we set this plan out for 2025, but we have had a significant, by setting this plan, we've been able to make sure that we've had significant progress in the plan. So I'll share with you how we did this. So in terms of energy, we were thinking about it and said, okay, what is it that we can do? So we said at MAS, what we can do is we possibly could generate more renewable energy. We didn't say in terms of that there are challenges in how much we can use directly. Right now, we say 51% of MAs runs on renewable energy. Of that, what we control is about 49% through our biomass, but we have taken every viable rooftop that we could find and we tried to put solar on it. But still we can't make that number, so we've made a commitment that we would find other ways in which we can clean the grid. If we say that manufacturers are putting pressure on grid, then whose responsibility is to try and clean that? And we want to do that through investment via wind power investments and other investments in renewable energy. There are also tiny things that we might not take for granted, like I just looked at some of the simple things we could do. Just in terms of your lighting, your air conditioning efficiency, compressed air, just efficiencies, and you start looking at it. We've had since 2010 a 20% saving in doing this. This makes business sense for you to go back and look at your stuff and look at the efficiency. And this is something that a lot of people don't do because we discount it in terms of the overall impact or cost. This does work. We've seen this, and it's a huge operational saving for us. The next one, waste. We started calling this a value stream, raw material. Because if you talk about what you're left with in terms of production waste, this is something that we really need to start looking at a material for something else. Many of you may have seen the Sri Lankan jerseys that we have out there that was made completely through ocean's plastic. Sorry, I'm saying this, I'm switching through these, but I'm trying to get to some of the interesting points that we can actually make business sense when you start looking at waste as a raw material and converting into product. We can take processors and you can start converting things like, for example, our fabric sludge. We have managed to convert into an eco-brick, which I went through earlier. And one of the other things that we find is that if everything is segregated, the biggest challenge we have anywhere in any of our landfills is everything is dumped on top of each other. Once it's segregated, we can find a solution for every single type of waste. And we have done that across all of NAS. Right now, I would say we have zero landfill. Everything is found a better purpose. And we hope to value enhance 100%. So I have gone through more. Sorry, can you click? Just keep clicking. So I'm going to go on to another part of a big, I've gone through energy, I've gone through waste. I want to go through, this is what I'm essentially saying, that the next big economy is really a waste economy. We really need to understand this. So the other thing that I want to talk about that's not often talked about in manufacturers and industries is the toxicity point of view. And really, I think it's very important for us to know what ingredients are being used. These go directly affecting water quality, etc. So please be mindful of whether it's a janitorial chemical or any other type of chemical. It has a direct impact on either in terms of air emissions or in terms of pollution. I have my favorite one. And I think this can absolutely be replicable. So at NAS, one of the things that we try to do in terms of biodiversity is a very simple thought. There isn't absolute science behind it. We've talked about the value of biodiversity. We've just taken a very simple thing, and I really wish all industries did this. We took up our built-up space. Before our factories got there, it may have been a rubber estate, it may have been something, or because of our mere existence, there was built-up space all around us. So what we said is, if we do 250 acres of built-up space, how can we restore, how can we conserve, or do some kind of forestation? At first we thought if we did it 1-to-1 would be great. But we're like, no, that's not fair. We need to do it at least 100 times our space to actually really impact that. Today, after almost 1.5, 2 years into it, we have come to 5 times our entire footprint in restoring. But we hope to find other ways. We've just started working with the Air Force on a seed bombing initiative to try and see how we can exponentially take this up, because it's really important for us to achieve this number by 2025. So I was whizzing through that. I hope you got most of it, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharika. Last but not the least, we have Dr. Eric Vikramanayake, who cannot be with us today, but is sharing a message on climate change and its socio-ecological impacts. He's a conservation biologist and also the chairperson of Environmental Foundation Limited and a director at the Worldwide Fund for Nature. He has 25 years of experience of leading conservation projects across several countries in Asia, including Sri Lanka, and has led technical teams to assess global climate change impacts on species and ecosystems for climate change integrated landscape conservation plans and strategies.
Pleasure to talk to you at this 3rd edition of the Green Conversations, and I apologize for not being there in person, but at least my carbon footprint will lower this way. Okay, so what are some of the everyday practices that we as individuals can do to reduce the trajectories and impacts of climate change? Well, about 20 years or more ago, I would have said small things like turning off the light switch when not in the room to conserve energy, take mass public transportation, consume less, just simple individual actions that would add up and contribute significantly to a global aggregate. But not anymore. I think it's far too late for us to fixate on the small things anymore. Climate change is here and it's affecting us, and the trajectories are far exceeding those projected by climate models. We are now in a crisis situation that demands bold crisis management actions. Almost every day we are inundated with news and information about how climate change will result in sea level rise and warming temperatures, but all of this seems so far away in the future, and it's difficult to relate to all of this. Do we really stop to think about what it'll be like when sea levels are a meter higher? So I believe that this is the wrong narrative. We need to wake up and understand that climate change is here and accept it. And it's also about changes, predictability of weather patterns. And we are witnessing it now. Climate change is also about more extreme weather events, from very heavy rainfall and prolonged droughts that cause either too much or too little water, and both of which can have very devastating consequences. Just look back over the past 3 to 4 years in Sri Lanka, where we have been hit by several storms that have killed and displaced people, resulted in property damage and damage to infrastructure with very severe economic costs to people and to the government. And this is only going to get worse. The statistics show that the number of climate-related disasters worldwide has doubled since the early 1990s. Just last month we saw Cyclone Fani hit the northeastern coast of India. And this month it was Cyclone Vayu. And both were among the strongest to make landfall in India over the past 20 years. And we could be next. And if we are hit, think about the death and destruction that they could wreak. We are already suffering from the impacts of droughts on one side of the country and floods on the other, just from heavy rainfall due to storms that were much, much less severe than these super cyclones. So what are the solutions? What can we do as individuals? Well, one thing is for sure. If we choose to ignore these trends and the ominous indicators that we are witnessing now, and just do the easy things like turning off the lights, just to ease our conscience, we will not survive. We have to start a climate revolution to make big changes happen. And I don't mean a violent revolution, but a movement to convince society, to convince policymakers, to convince the business community about the impending dangers. The consequences of doing nothing and hoping it will all go away are just too dire and too severe to ignore all this. And making such change happen is not beyond their capabilities. Just look at the phenomenon named Greta Thunberg, a 15-year-old Swedish girl who sat outside Sweden's parliament all alone to protest about the inaction to tackle climate change. Her simple action evolved into global campaigns, the school strike for climate and Fridays for Future. Unfortunately, we Sri Lankans have not joined this revolution. So let's get up and get out there and do our part. After all, it's our future and our future generations that are at stake as well. Look at what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the youngest woman to be elected to the US Congress, is doing. She's stirring things up in the US with a Green New Deal, trying to push through several climate mitigations and action through government. Yes, there is opposition, and yes, she may not get everything that she wants through the system. And yes, some of it may be impractical to achieve in that system, but she has raised awareness and she has forced this whole narrative into the policy dialogue. And even if she gets part of it done, she is making headway. Okay, so we know what has to be done in Sri Lanka. There's enough scientific evidence to show that intact ecosystems, such as forests and wetlands and coral reefs and mangroves, are important to build resilience against climate change and the consequent extreme weather-related disasters. Sri Lanka has precious little remaining of these ecosystems now, and we desperately and urgently need to protect what we have. And Sri Lanka has pledged to protect ecosystems and also reforest several degraded areas as forest reforestation targets. And these commitments have been made as pledges and promises at several international fora, and we have signed covenants to do so. We have also pledged to shift to renewable energy as yet another contribution to slow down climate change. All good plans and policies and pledges and promises. But what's the government doing to make good on these? Nothing. So we need our own Greta Thunbergs and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortezes here in Sri Lanka. We need to hold the government accountable for all the promises that they have made to address climate change and deliver on these promises and pledges. We need to take legal action where necessary. And this has to be led by the younger generations. Those who can and are so inclined should get into the mainstream political system and make changes from within. And others who are not so politically inclined should support them. The situation is just too dire and too urgent to focus on the small stuff anymore. Not that they're unimportant, but we need to push boundaries and push hard. We need to bring about change for a future where the next generation can live in relative safety and not have to scrabble around and to survive in a bleak, Mad Maxian type world. That's what we all need to do as individuals and do it together. Thank you.
Before we move on to the Q&A round, I'd like to invite Navini Premaral, a third-year undergraduate law student from the University of Pennsylvania, who's passionate in eco-poetry, to come on stage and recite her poem that she has specifically written for us. I dreamt I was in the future, beneath a clear blue sky, where I thought I'd see a desert with fields of trees so divine. I took a stroll outside. The air was fresh and clean. Children played in clear blue water. Animals wandered safely and free. I asked myself, where's all the destruction gone? Who made all this change? And a voice from afar said, they planted trees, used solar power for free, changed some laws, talked about the flaws, temperatures weren't rising, corals stopped bleaching, and it all became possible because some never stopped trying. I woke up with a jolt, sat upright in bed. So many wars to fight for. I chose our earth instead. Thank you.
Thank you, Nandini. For the Q&A round, I'd like to invite all the speakers to come on stage and join me. And because we're running out of time, I think we can only stick to about 4 questions. So until the speakers come on stage, if you have questions for any speaker, you can raise your hand and I will come to you with the mic. Yes, we have one.
So my question is that, as you already mentioned, we have a lot of plans, we have a lot of projects, we have a lot of things regarding the environment. But the problem is implementation. So my question is that, even though in Sri Lanka, the violation of environmental is not a crime, since it is even under the constitution also, it is in the directive principle of state policy. It's not a fundamental right. So my question is that, why we are in the initial state, when we are going to attain the real sustainable development? So it's my question. That's my question.
I think Shamila might be a good person to ask this question because you spoke about how the government and the rights aspect of it.
Okay. So there are a few environmental lawyers also. I think at one point the environment, right to clean environment or healthy environment is given in the constitution. So when we were doing some taking legal actions at the Environmental Foundation, we made use of that clause. But what's happening here is, okay, to be realistic, is this political and like 4 years plan. We don't have that real need. That's why we thought in implementing projects, we need to be innovative. We all, is that earlier, like say 10 years back when we were doing projects, we did research, we then got the partnerships with government, we still do. But rather than like relying on the government system or the machine to take forward these actions, and changing attitudes of people we have been doing for like so forever, which is not giving us real products. So what we thought is better to couple it with some sort of like benefits people would be getting. So that's really answering. About I think 2010 and 11 at EFL we did one project in the Mahoya area. So the only component since then that has been doing is the livelihood component. The alternative livelihoods to the sand miners we give, they are still doing. So if we couple it with some sort of benefits to people, that would last long. But all these other things in this current system, I don't know, sorry.
Thank you, Chamla. Okay, we have another question.
Hi, I'm Kanushka from the Open University. First of all, lots of respect for Mars, for what has Mars done with the solar panels now. But I've spoken to a few engineers in the industry, and what they said is everything boils down to time and money. So I think that's something that applies to all of us. Like we'd always go for the cheap alternative, something that's cheaper and quick. So like for example, if a factory releasing refrigerants or emissions, they just do it because it's cheaper to release it into the air. So we could do all kinds of projects and implementations, but it always boils down to what's cheaper. And even with us, like no one would use public transport. If you have a vehicle, or if the vehicle is cheaper, we won't go to an electric car if it's expensive. So I think that's something we should all keep in mind and focus on, because that's what people are. The path of least resistance is what we always take. Thank you.
Well, it's not essentially a question, but I think Sharika might be able to answer his query.
To us, the way we've approached it is, yes, you can ignore it, but let's take something like water, which I didn't cover. To me, nobody pays the true cost of water, right? But I didn't get a chance to go into it, but MAS has made a commitment to reduce 75% intensity of water. Why? Does it make economical sense to us? Possibly not, but if we continue manufacturing, assuming the water is going to keep coming, we're going to get a huge shock and a huge capital expenditure that we can't afford in the future. So what we're doing is that we are planning for it now, not because we think that we have plenty of money and it's just I think with most things, like even in terms of energy, let me tell you why industries are currently, they are subsidized for energy. But the day that subsidy is taken out and you haven't got ready with it, this is going to catch up with you. So none of what I've shared with you is done only with a nation-mindedness. It is definitely a fact. But there's absolute economical viability in everything that we're sharing. It's just the guys who are slow to catch on, their long-termism will really be a problem. So, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you,
Anyways,
Thank you. We also have Mr. Ranga Kalavida.
I would like to first give a feedback to the first question. It's about the law and the rights. And the environment protection is not a right internationally as well. I would like to say this, a lot of people when we talk about climate change, they think as a country we are not doing anything. Our progress is less than that. But if you look at the history, the climate change is a problem not created by countries like us. It was created by the so-called developed countries. If you look at the historic emissions, 90% of the historic emissions has come from the EU and the United States. And if you talk about rights, then the rights should go to Mr. Trump first. But Mr. Trump unfortunately not realizing that. So it's a diabolical question, but that's a reality. So probably we need to be in terms of investments. Yes, this is something we're talking about Paris Agreement. This is a global issue. This is an issue which you can't solve individually by countries. It's a global issue because we don't have a Sri Lankan atmosphere or a US atmosphere. We have a common atmosphere. We are in one home called planet Earth. And the action should come globally. Now, this is the biggest problem, where the investment should come. So these investment be required because of a problem created by the developed countries. So the Paris Agreement has created a space saying that the developed countries should provide finance and technology for developing countries to make sure that they are going in the correct path, the greener path, rather than taking the same path that the developed countries have taken. So unfortunately, we have not capitalized in our countries, capitalizing that international financial and technological support available. Nobody has very less has taken initiatives to tap these financial resources. We have the Green Climate Fund, we have the Adaptation Fund, we have climate investment funds, whatever. We are talking about accessing about $200 billion a year from 2020 for climate change rectification. But there we need to put a little effort. It's not only for businesses, it's about for the government, for the academia, for the researchers, for the non-governmental. There are options. probably that knowledge is not available wider, which we make aware of our people and get the maximum benefit out of it.
Thank you. So we have two more questions from the audience. And yes, okay. After you, maybe then we can have you, and maybe one question from this side, which has been silent.
So I've been trying to meet you for a few weeks. My name is Lucky. So I hope you're feeling better today. We were last supposed to be a few weeks ago and you were sick. So I want to explain a few things. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm in the renewable energy business. I've been developing a biomass business here since 2012. We have planted about 100 million trees with smallholder farmers. We have 50,000 of them. But I wanted to tell you two things. One is that I'm very focused on getting money into Sri Lanka. So what I've done is attended a whole pile of seminars and things outside of Sri Lanka where I've learned how to issue a bond and also to sell to the pension funds. And then have a look at how we can copy what Seychelles has done for a blue-green bond here in Sri Lanka. And also how we can raise money to reforest the tea estates, again through issuing of bonds. And I'm working with, I have a group of people in my company who are ex-UN, who are good at doing climate registration programs, etc. So I just observed the fact that the Navy is planting trees, and you're not doing anything about getting carbon credits. You could be paid by the world, for that mangroves that you did, but you have to register it on the first day. And I'm really happy to sit down with the government and do that, because we have a team doing that in our company. We've registered our Viricidia for carbon, first project from Sri Lanka to the worldwide carbon markets. And there is some value that we can bring. So anybody who's planting trees, please understand that you can, if you approach it from a carbon point of view, people don't understand the value of carbon credits, but when we first started, we assumed we would have $2 a ton. And today I'm talking at $15 a ton. So there is value, it's an income stream that you shouldn't ignore. And so, we'll just comment to that. There is somebody, and I'm it, and I'm working with Shahara, and we are doing this in Sri Lanka. So we're trying to see what we can do to help the government.
Thank you. We have one more question from this side, and perhaps one more from the other side.
Thank you. I'm going to pick up where Dr. Eric left off, when he urged people to come forward. And I think Chandra just touched upon the fact that there are a lot of policies in place, there is a lot of scientific work that's been done, but nobody's listening. We're going to be facing elections in a couple of months' time. And I'm urging that everybody takes leadership here. And I'm asking, what are you, each one specifically, going to do? All the environmental organizations, all the companies, understanding the dire need at this hour, what are you all going to do to make a change in how people in government think? And I think, is that possible? What can you do?
Do you want to direct the question at anybody? No. Okay. You have.
I think I will answer this because EFL is working with a lot of ministries, and we are trying to tell them that, like the gentleman said, everything is not about money. There are things that now the science is trying to value these services and goods that are provided by the environment. So you're putting like a monetary value into these services and goods. So we are trying to show them like, a monetary value and say, look, this is how much you're going to save if you actually focus on this. But I don't know to which extent, because for Sri Lankan politicians, the greed and the ignorance is too much. So it's a really hard wall to crack, but we are trying. And also, like, we're taking legal initiatives. EFL is doing that. But these things take a very long time. So by the time we get to that point when they agree to do something, all the damage is done. So elections are a very good way to start. And I think, everybody should really consider what this is. We're trying to save the environment for the future generations. It's not for the earth. It'll go on. It will evolve. So this is really for whoever that's coming next to take over the world. So think about it and vote carefully.
Okay, one more question from this side. Okay, we'll keep it short as possible.
Can we fast to death till Ravi Karunaka is locked up or something?
Yeah.
Fast to death.
Just a very quick question. Quick question. One of the speakers mentioned the targets from reforestation from 28% to 32%. But when you go maybe 100 years ago, it was about 80%. Why don't we look at a target much more challenging, like reforesting Sri Lanka by 50% or something, rather than just 52% or 3%?
Well, I'll direct this question again to Chatu.
I know, I'm just saying this because we had a workshop on this very recently, and one of the things that the Army seed bobbing team came and said was that it's not easy because you have to have the right land. The conditions, the environmental conditions have to be perfect. You have to choose the right species. Not every tree species will grow in like similar environments. So there are certain conditions that you have to meet, and I think the success rate of something like that is very high, low. And the fact that it takes a lot of energy to actually replant and monitor. The best thing is to save the forests that we have and, change the way that we settle people and how the development activities are focused on certain areas. So I think it's not the most feasible option, but we do need to focus on reforestation. At the same time, we also need to cut down on deforestation rates.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay,
Just one minute thing, I think that's where we need to be more innovative, because in most of the time reforestation programs don't work because the survival rate is poor, there is no maintenance and the tree species. So that's why we thought we have to be innovative and give something to the communities, some sort of benefit. That's what I mentioned in the Ratnapura district, that we are doing the Kitul program. So in the Ratnapura district, we plant about 5,000 trees, and the Kaludar district another 6,000, so that we are sort of reducing the stress upon the natural products, the trees in the natural products, and substituting it with their home gardens and other areas. That's one way that you can do reforestation programs. Otherwise, it's very, so far what we have done, most of the things are failure.
Thank you, Chanda. I thank all the speakers. Finally, I'd like to invite Adisha Pereira, the Sustainability Manager of Nation Stats Bank, to present a token of appreciation to all our speakers and our poetess. Adisha, can you remain on stage for the token of appreciation for Thank you. This brings us to the closure of the event, and I thank all the speakers for the very informative and eye-opening discussion that even the audience is very enthusiastically participating in. And I thank Nation Stats Bank for the sponsorship of the event, and Pulse Media, who have joined as our newest online media partner, as well as Hatch for partnering up as the venue facilitator. And last but not the least, I'd like to thank the EFL team for organizing the event and for all their hard work. We would warmly welcome you to come back to our event series, the next one as well. And also keep yourself outside. We have some refreshments. And as you go out, you can see our merchandise as well. If you want to support our organization, have a look at our merchandise as well. So thank you very